Hello, health seekers. Welcome to this episode of Fork and Face, the only nutrition and cosmetic channel in which you do not want to say the name in an Irish accent very quickly, as Lauren established on week one. The only channel that brings together nutrition, fasting, and cosmetics. Dr. Abs, Lauren Tucker, welcome on board.
Thank you very much. So it was me that was the reason everyone was late today. There was a lot of traffic in London, and but we're here now. We're all good, and I can see there's a lot of questions already.
So, yeah, lots of questions piling up. So let's get into these. I'll kick you off with one to start, and then I'll start tagging the questions.
Cool.
So let's put this one up on. So a question from Daniel. I have cervical endoscopic. But yeah, how would you pronounce that one?
Foraminotomy.
Well done. Surgery in 2 weeks. Would you advise going into surgery fasted, 48 or 72? And would DMSO help with recovery? I have no nerve, and that is part one. There is a part two. Bear with me a second. Transmission from C5, C6, and never in my brachial plexus, causing loss of function on my deltoid and bicep in my right arm. What are your thoughts? We covered DSMO last week, didn't we?
I think we did, yeah. DMSO. The thing is, this is a really, really individual question. Like, I would need to be the person doing the actual treatment to know your medical history, the reason, this choice of treatment was selected over other treatments, et cetera, et cetera. So we can only speak generally. And we are also not giving medical advice. We're just, you should always speak to the person doing the treatment for best advice, but we're happy to give thoughts. For those, that aren't aware, so what he's talking about, a cervical endoscopic foraminotomy, CEF, if you like, it's like a minimally invasive surgical procedure, right? It's nothing, I know it sounds complicated, but it's not that complicated. You're basically trying to alleviate something called stenosis, a neuroforaminal stenosis. Now, this is a sort of a narrowing where which is called a foramina or a foramen in a singular, and that's where nerve roots exit the spinal canal. So that's basically what they're trying to do. And what they're trying to do is decompress the nerve, try and restore the ability of the nervous function to keep going through that nervous signal transmission, probably to places like, the deltoid and the biceps. Now, short-term fasting is a standard anesthetic requirement in order to prevent what we call pulmonary respiration, aspiration, not respiration. Extended, in the scientific literature, it's controversial, 48 to 72 hours. However, in the scientific literature, there's also no control on nutrition, as we know. So it's a tricky one. I mean, it depends on your metabolic status, but all I can say is potentially it's helpful, because if you're in a state of ketosis, it's, Rich, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's quite anti-inflammatory. And 100%. If you're going to have a procedure like that, inflammation is the last thing you want. So for me, it's a potential yes, but you need to ideally have a chat with the person doing it, as opposed to us who have not treated you whatsoever. Rich, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that at all.
Yeah, I think fasting is an incredible tool. There are other questions in the chat regarding fasting, which we can get into. I'm a big fan of fasting, but as you know, I recommend people don't jump into a fast if they're not used to fasting. Much of the research is done on people coming into fasting from a standard oxidative stress background, and if we look at the research that Lauren's put forward recently, in the school group, and in regards to the guys doing the dry fasting, as carried out by Russian doctors and a guy called August Dunning, these are incredibly beneficial, but they're done generally on people who are not already in a ketogenic state, and they're extreme. So they're extreme measures. Now, if you suffer with, and I'm not going to say the word because I don't want to get banned, something that begins with C that's very nasty, the C word.
Yeah, and there's two C words since
and I'm not talking about the one that ends in T. The other C word. If we're talking about that, look, there are these things can be extremely beneficial at extreme ends of that protocol. What I would say is if you're coming into this sort of lifestyle and you implement fasting, I think it should be done through a series of incremental changes, through starting with wet fasts, building up to dry fast, so on and so forth. My point to this is the body builds up its not tolerance, but its ability to benefit from the state of autophagy and to be able to be in a fasted state. It's not as much of a shock to the body. So anybody can fast, but those who are already in a ketogenic state, they have a springboard, if you like. So if Daniel, if you're used to fasting already and you're in a ketogenic state regularly, I would definitely recommend going into this during a fasted state. If you have implemented dry fasting, I think this is way better than wet fasting, and we can get into this if Lauren has anything to add in a little while. But fasting coming into this 100%, it's incredibly beneficial. So fasting does a number of things. It puts us into a state of autophagy, which is cellular repair regeneration. It helps block inflammation by blocking a pathway called NLRP3 inflammasome. It increases insulin sensitivity, brown fat activation, increases lipolysis. It increases all of these pathways in the body that allow us to heal, build, and repair. I would do fasting for anything that allows me to heal and repair to the max capacity. So if you're used to fasting, I would certainly come into this during a fasted state. What have you got any thoughts, Lauren?
Yeah, does, but there's silent thoughts.
Yeah, I think you're you may be muted.
Yeah, I was muted. Sorry. Yeah, I agree. I think going into that with a fast. If you haven't done fasting before, to start with, maybe either a shorter dry fast or a wet fast if you haven't done any kind of fasting before, and then gradually build up as you go. Can you hear me all right? I'm definitely having issues. Cool.
All good?
Yep.
Yeah. There is while we're on fasting, look, there is another question in there which came from last week. And it was from Neil Franks and said, answer a question from last week. What are the benefits of a 72-hour water fast over a 36 to 40-hour dry fast? I'm guessing that means they put water in there twice, but I'm guessing the second is dry. Any thoughts on that, Lauren? I'm guessing issues with the mic. I'll jump in with this one. So look, I've implemented dry and wet fasts a number of times. I was a big fan of wet fasting for a number of years. I always believed that there was no additional benefit to a dry fast. Suffering with migraines, I've always stayed away from a dry fast because part of my migraines are caused by dehydration. So I decided to partake in what started as a 24-hour dry fast in the school group, run by Lauren, who's a fasting expert. And Lauren, for full disclosure, has done 8 days dry fast. That's 8 days without any food and water. The fast continued into 9 days, which she broke with water. Like, that just baffles my mind. Yet we're told, if you go on to Google and search ChatGPT, for example, what happens after 3 days with no food and water, it will tell you that you will die. You know, you start going blind and all these sorts of things. Anyway, so I started this 24-hour fast. The group partook in the 24-hour fast. Did the 24 hours. I decided to continue. I went on and I finished with a 72. I finished on 72, which is equal to the longest fast that I'd ever done previously. Now, the first 24 hours, I didn't feel any hunger at all, no thirst. It was easier from that perspective because during a wet fast, you've got these cravings and you're being fueled by the water, I think, which fuels like these cravings and need for food and for water. So for me, I found it a lot easier. Now, I came down with a migraine about 28 hours in, decided to persevere, and I've never beaten a migraine before without some sort of intervention, supplementation, or high sodium dose or medication or something. Now, I used to suffer with them every day, and I was on 3 different medications for many years. This is the only lifestyle that's allowed me to come away from that. Now, at 28 hours, I came down with a migraine, persevered. I woke up the next day and I was migraine free, and touch wood, I have not had a migraine since. Now, we discussed this in the school group last week, but that has blown my mind. Now, I can feel like something brewing, but it doesn't come to fruition. Now, I don't know, and I'm not saying that the migraine's cured, but I certainly saw benefits that way. Now, when we talk about dry fasting versus a wet fast, a dry fast, typically, you get like a 3-day head start. So like a 24-hour wet fast, for example, or dry fast, you're going to get 3 days or 72 hours benefit of a wet fast. So you get that 3 days initial kick for a start. Plus, I think there's additional benefit if you are already ketogenic, because if you look at the research, 1 to 2 days of that initial entry into the fasted state and autophagy is that gravitation towards entering that state of autophagy. So for me, I think the benefits that I noticed from a 72, what I found when you compare the research to 5 and 6 days, that's where I saw the benefits. So when you look at the research of the things that occur during 5 and 6 days of a wet fast, that's what I found with just 72 hours of a dry fast. Now, we do have one of the world leading experts in dry fasting coming into the school group very soon. So for private Q&A, so the link is in the chat, and that is in the bar at the bottom. This is August Dunning. He will be joining us very soon in the school group, so make sure you take advantage and sign up to that. But I think the benefits of dry fasting far outweigh a wet fast, in my own experience. Have you any experience, Abs?
No, I literally don't have the willpower and can't be bothered. I'm not even going to sugarcoat it. I just want to eat steak.
Yeah, I want to eat and drink, but that's the key as well, because the benefits of fasting, like we just mentioned, autophagy, mitophagy, brown fat activation, increased lipolysis sensitivity, all of those are elicited from a ketogenic state, just at a lower degree. So when we're ketogenic, we're still in that zone all the time. It's just we're not, pushing that that limit. So we benefit from this purely just by being ketogenic.
Yeah, 100%. I don't have any major health issues that I feel like I want to treat. I get sore after the gym, as you'd expect. I get tired if I don't sleep, or I've been traveling across time zones. That's basically it. Like, I don't have anything else. So I don't personally feel a need to do these things. I'm happy to just eat as much steak as I can, to be honest.
Yeah, 100%. I completely agree. But
quick question, by the way. Where is August Dunning from as a country? Is he American?
I think he's States-based. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
so Lauren knows the score. So she's managed to get him in. So she's been working with him closely, and she's managed to get him into school for a live Q&A at some point. So that's going to be an awesome interview. Can't wait for that. So next question. I've got my opinion on this. I know you have also. What are polyphenols, and why are they treated like rock stars?
Well, I mean, they're being treated like a rock star and being a rock star is completely different, right? So yeah, polyphenols, they're seen as a powerhouse of these like phytochemical superheroes that we get. They're actually, it's a class of molecule, right? There's thousands of naturally occurring ones, and these are what we call secondary metabolites in plants. So primary metabolites are things like fats or sugars, like glucose, and then secondary metabolites are things like polyphenols. So these aren't used for basic growth. They're how do I describe it? They're like an immune, defense system, not an immune, like a plant defense system, and they help the plant against UV damage, oxidative damage, even pathogens. Now, people talk about them in our biology like they are this sort of great chief whip of the epigenome. But actually, as I'm sure you would agree, loads of things can control the epigenome, or everything we do in our life is the master regulator of the epigenome. But there are multiple classes. So so there's about 4 main classes. You got flavonoids, the most common ones like on onions and green tea, like quercetin, people have heard of that. Phenolic acids, like in coffee, whole grains as well, like chlorogenic acid. You've got polyphenolic amides. These typically, if I'm not mistaken, you get them in mainly just chili and oats. In chili, it's capsaicinoids, and then in oats, it's avenanthramides, if I'm not mistaken. But then there's other phenolics as well, like still beans related to resveratrol in red wine, lignans in flax seeds as well. But the thing is, you know, they go into the NRF2 pathway, and I won't talk too much about that. You can, but anything that goes into that, you got to question. You know, is it helping, or does it look like it's helping because our defense is up? What kind of things bring our defense up? Rich, you take over from this point. I'm sure this perfect entry for you.
Yeah, fantastic. So look, you know, it's, as you say, they are polyphenolic in structure, many hydrogen atoms, and they can be beneficial in the early stages, which will, this is a good segue actually into one of the other questions regarding hydrogen water, which we have. And I know that there's a big famous influencer who's released hydrogen water, and I would err on the side of caution for this if you're ketogenic and carnivore, which I'll get into. So effectively what happens is that we consume these compounds and they elicit the activation of the pathway that Abs just alluded to, the NRF2 pathway. The NRF2 pathway can be beneficial in the early stages because it's a pro-oxidant. So these things are pro-oxidants. They're not antioxidants. They are pro-oxidants, which means that the defense system is activated. They're activated via the NRF2 pathway. This leads to the basically oxidative stress. It turns on a whole host of genes to combat the damage like glutamate and cysteine, so on and so forth. And this will increase things like glutathione, the body's master antioxidant. So what we see is this increase of glutathione, which will conjugate to a toxin and remove it via something called glucuronidation. Now, this is what we see in the lab, essentially. This is the benefit that we see. So we see this increase in this antioxidant effect, but it's come from a pro-oxidant. Now, what this means is that it's something that we shouldn't consume long-term. It can be beneficial in the short term because, and it works in the same way as medication. We consume medication. Medication addresses the problem or helps us address the symptom while we look at the root cause. And then we fix the root cause and this goes away. What we shouldn't and what we're not designed to do is consume medication long-term for prolonged periods of time. We're not designed to be on medication every day, all day for prolonged periods of time. Because what happens in the end is overexpression of this pathway, NRF2, leads to the activation of other pathways like NFKB, which are highly inflammatory pathways. And this leads to inflammation and a whole host of problems and actually ends up causing and contributing to the very thing that you've taken this thing for in the first place. Now, there can be benefits to consuming things that contain polyphenols in the early stages if you are sick. Again, because plant compounds are medication, and when you activate this pathway, it acts as medication. So what happens is if we're in a state of high oxidative stress, which most people are, I would argue that the three of us on this call are not because of the lifestyle we live. So what happens is these things have lots of hydrogen atoms and they will bind and they will help prevent free radicals, which can lower oxidative stress. So this is what we see in the research. It lowers this reactive oxygen species and this is what we see. So we see this recovery back to what we deem to be an optimal state. Now, that's fine if you're sick, but what's made you sick in the first place? And that's what you need to look at. Now, if you are ketogenic and carnivore, are there benefits to taking these compounds which are high in polyphenols? I would argue that they're dangerous. And the reason for this is we operate between an upper and lower limit. Now, this reactive oxygen species, ROS, we look at it as being a bad thing. We look at insulin as being bad. We look at glucose as being bad. We look at inflammation as being bad. We look at cortisol. All of these things are essential. They are required and we need them, but we need them to operate between the correct upper and lower limit. And reactive oxygen species is no different. So we need reactive oxygen species just to do its thing and operate between an upper and lower limit. Now, what happens, the three of us on this call, I would argue strongly that we are not suffering with lots, at least, of oxidative stress. I believe that we're working in an optimal limit. And this is why many people within the carnivore space have put fruit and vegetables and carbs back in the summer months, which I'll get on to. So imagine we're in this limit, optimal, chugging along, working incredibly well. Then we take these compounds, which are high in polyphenols. Well, this is going to lower this reactive oxygen species further, but we don't want to lower it. Now it's gone through this bottom limit, and now it's in a state of reductive stress. Now we've got problems. This is the opposite to oxidative stress, but it is just as bad. So when we see the carnivores within our community recently who think that they've put fruit and honey and carbs back in and look, everything is working the way it should, it's because the summer months in a higher UV index, high UV index increases melanin. Melanin quenches and reduces reactive oxygen species. So for us, it's led to reductive stress or a reductive stress state. Now we consume fruit and vegetables, which cause oxidative stress because of the glycation. And this Amadori reaction and the Haynes reaction leads to glycation and reactive oxygen species, which puts us back into this optimal limit. So if you were sick, medication can help. But what's made you sick is the question. The plants can help if you're sick, but ideally you want to get to a situation in which the three of us in where we're living a ketogenic carnivore-based lifestyle, we're incredibly fit and healthy, and we don't need to consume these compounds because they are, and I would deem to be harmful, because anything that's going to contain these higher levels of these hydrogen atoms is potentially going to cause risk to us, which is what this next question alludes to. And this is something that is trending currently on social. What are your thoughts, Abs?
On hydrogen water? First of all, I don't think there's enough of a need for people to really be doing it. I get some of the logic behind it. For those that aren't aware, it's molecular hydrogen, so H2, so the diatomic gas. And people call it this sort of great antioxidant. Now, the reason they seem to do that is mainly down to its physicochemical properties. So H2, hydrogen, is the lightest atom, or the element, I should say, or the smallest element in terms of the number of subatomic particles making up the atom. Because it's so small, it allows it to penetrate biological barriers that bigger antioxidants like vitamin C, vitamin E, they just can't do. Even glutathione, much smaller than that. You know, glutathione is a tripeptide, glycine, cysteine, and glutamic acid, I think. And molecular hydrogen is like one fraction of one of those amino acids, to give you the difference in size. So because it is the smallest molecule in existence in the universe, it has unbeatable ability to diffuse through barriers. And so it can go through very, very passively, rapidly across cell membranes, and therefore to the mitochondria and the nucleus as well, which is the key. Now, this is what you get as subcellular bioavailability, which you don't get with a lot of other antioxidant molecules. So it can, get those other molecules can get stuck in the extracellular matrix, in the cytoplasm within the cell, whereas this can get to the core, the DNA and the mitochondria, and that's where the change begins. Now, most antioxidants will just target, even real or fake antioxidants will just target free radicals in general. Molecular hydrogen is interesting because it's selective. It's almost like there's a computer in it telling it what to go for and what not to go for. It's not indiscriminate, because the human body needs certain free radicals. We'd be dead if we had no free radicals in our body, right? We need nitric oxide and we need hydrogen peroxide, NO and H2O2. These, when they're in certain amounts, they apply a certain amount of chemical pressure, which determines whether the cell does this or the cell does that. And so that becomes a signal for the immune response and dilation of blood vessels. Just like depending on the amount of NADH and FADH2, if we're studying the Randall cycle, we may have more of one or the other, and having more or less of a particular one, that itself is a signal for the rest of the cell to do this or to do that. Now, molecular hydrogen, that will target not those key free radicals that we need and we need to leave alone, but it will just get the sort of bad guys, if you like. So that would be something like a hydroxyl radical, which is a dot-OH or a HO dot, depending on which way you want to look at it, or a peroxynitrite, which is, I think it's ONOO minus. Okay, there's a radical formulae in chemistry. And so it neutralizes these high energy antioxidants into oxidants, I should say, into just water, H2O, which is why it's very, very crucial. And so this prevents damage from free radicals, or what some people like to call oxidative damage, without damaging the signaling pathways of things like NO and H2O2, hydrogen peroxide. So logically, it sounds great, but actually it will upregulate NRF2 as well. And then we go back to you, Rich, in terms of the answer you just gave, which is why it's not automatic as, oh, it's brilliant, everyone just take it. I think there's more to it. I'm not saying it's harmful, but it's not as simple as just saying take it and everything will be miraculously better instantaneously.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's yeah. Do you think there's any danger in regards to what we've just said with somebody being ketogenic and carnivore potentially leading to reductive stress?
It's a good question. I don't know the answer, but what I would say is what is being reduced. That's the key, because remember, this has a lot of selectivity. And so if it was anything else, yes, potentially there is an argument to be made for reductive stress or reductive damage, whatever label you want to put on it, because it is a label. But with the selectivity, I honestly don't know. I can't answer that at all. I've no idea.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. I mean, if it does happen in the same response as we get from plants, I would argue that it's potentially. I mean, I'm always torn when it comes. I own a supplement company, but I always try to keep things as nature intended, and that's what I always come back to. So it's one to watch, but brilliant question.
Yep.
So let's put the next question up. Let's see if Lauren can read this one. Let's see if her mic is working. No, she can't hear me. I think she's having issues. She can hear you clearly, but she's having issues with me. So yeah, must be.
I think she's just fed up of you and muted your channel on her thing. That's probably it.
I can hear you, Abs. I can hear you.
Great. Always me.
Yeah.
We have a question from Bankpool Artist who says, "Why bubbles in my urine?"
Yeah,
on,
I mean,
after you.
Well, when the splash occurs in the bowl, that's going to cause a little bit of froth and there's bubbles there. That's my answer.
Yeah. So look, it's that it could be some sort of cleaning agent in the toilet. If you pee into jugs, which
right, hold on, sorry.
Right,
where have you got this one? Because there's no Wikipedia page with that one on. I don't know what childhood you had in Wales, mate.
I'm so hard done by we don't have toilets. There is a reason for this, I promise. And it's Lauren's fault. I blame Lauren. So look, part of the protocol when you do a dry fast is you pee into jugs. And this...
No. Listen. She was taking the mick when she told you that. And you've fallen for it.
She's definitely not, because I've seen it. I promise. So look, it's because of what comes out. And basically, it's to show people when you're doing a dry fast, your body makes metabolic water. So you see the level of water reduce over a few days, and then it starts to increase. And then after days like 5 and 6, you start to get sediment in the bottom, which is called slag. And this is essentially all of the broken down toxins which are coming out in the urine. So I've done this. I've peed into a jug.
I can tell. I can tell you've done
you
this,
can tell.
Yeah.
So sometimes when I pee, usually, which is more often than not, I don't always pee in jugs, into the toilet bowl. If there's some sort of cleaning agent, that can cause the foam to appear in the urine. It can be the force of the urine hitting the water. It could be dehydration. It could be overhydration. It could be too much protein in the diet. Not too much protein, let's rephrase that. It can be to do with high levels of protein, which when we are ketogenic and carnivore is obviously going to be very common. So that could be another contributor. So what I would suggest is, if you're worried and concerned, pee into a jug. And it's going to cause foam. How long does the foam remain? If it doesn't remain for very long, then it's nothing to be worried about. But it is common to see increased foam in jugs as well as the toilet bowl when you are living a ketogenic and carnivore-based lifestyle because of the higher protein. So
if I ever meet your mum, I'm gonna definitely put this question to her about your jug peeing antics from when you were a child.
She doesn't know.
Well, she doesn't know at all. I'll let her know, don't worry. Mrs. Smith, do you remember that time the water tasted funny after dinner?
I remember the time I found a bottle in your car, which looked suspiciously like a bottle
No, that's
of
because the
urine.
plastic was old. The water was all right.
Next question.
Right, we have a question here. It's for me, actually. What was the reason for Lauren's 8-day dry fast? Was it medical or just a test? So 2 reasons. Number 1 was I was just really interested. I found out about dry fasting and never heard anything about that before. And I dove straight into researching, and I was just so interested in it. And I just decided I really wanted to try it. All the benefits. Obviously, I'd never done that before, and I found out that you could get rid of bacteria and viruses that lay dormant in the body. So I wanted to try that, and yeah, so it was just a test. I really did believe that it was healing, and that you can get rid of the bacteria and the viruses and all those sorts of things. And I actually proved that happened in some of the results that I had physically. Going back to what Richard was saying about peeing in a jug, I actually did that towards the end of my dry fast, so that I could measure, so I could measure how much urine I was producing, even though I hadn't had any water for that amount of time, and my body was still producing urine. But in the urine, you could see lots of sediment, lots of what they call slag, and that is basically dead cells. Sorry, abs. Dead cells, and all the things coming out of the body you can physically see leaving the body, which is really interesting. So yeah, I would say it was both, really. I wanted to get rid of dormant bacteria and viruses that have been there my whole life, and I also did want to test it. So yeah, I would say it's a bit of both on that one. Another question from Eddie Penn. Thoughts on coconut flour in small amounts, 1 tablespoon, for use in baked keto bread, eggs, butter, sour cream, coconut flour.
What are your thoughts, Abs? I've got my opinion.
I've literally never used it, so I have no opinion, unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. So look, if we look into why we've gravitated into this way of living, it's to be optimally healthy. Now, the 3 of us on this call are what I would class as strict carnivore, and we're probably amongst some of the strictest in the world. But we've taken many steps, lots of incremental changes in order to get to where we are now. Now, I own a business, Keto Pro. I sell and manufacture low-carb ketogenic products, many of which are designed for someone who is coming into this way of living to make better choices. Now, I would not consume coconut flour any longer because they contain compounds that I don't want to be consuming as a strict carnivore. Now, I'm 12 years into my journey. For me to consume that would actually cause me problems because of the compounds in there that my body would just reject like this. And it is very much the case. And I think the 3 of us can attest to this. If we were to eat vegetables now, we would have a very upset stomach almost immediately. Any seed oils, even eggs are starting to become problematic because the body wants to preference the creme de la creme, which is the grass-fed beef and lamb. But if you're new to the lifestyle, this is a product that I would encourage to use because it's going to be far healthier than any of the compounds that contain the wheat germ agglutinins, the gluten, so on and so forth. So if you're adding that to keto bread, it's going to be low carb, it's going to be low in other toxins, and it's going to allow you to maintain the journey and gravitate deeper down. I make keto bread, I make keto wraps, and I make keto bagels and buns, and they're incredible. You know, it's I tested them and tasted them when we were developing, but they're not something that I would use every day because I'm a strict carnivore. But these are the types of things that I have created to give to my daughter, for example, who doesn't want to be carnivore. I'd love her to be carnivore, but I'm giving her these swaps in order to basically limit the amount of toxins that she's consuming from other things. So it's about making better choices. If you're new to the lifestyle, low carb ketogenic lifestyle, these are perfect swaps in order to gravitate and maintain the journey, because this is all about the rule and not the exception. This is all about the rule and not the exception. You don't need to be 100% strict all the time. You don't need to listen to the keto police or the carnivore police, because consistency is key. If it's these swaps the keto breads, the low carb breads that allow you to maintain the journey, then benefits are conferred. So yeah, I'm a big fan, if you're new to it, of things like coconut flour or any other alternative for that matter. Have you got any thoughts, Lauren? If you can hear me? No, I don't think she can hear me. Oh, I think you muted.
Yeah, I'm unmuted. Yeah, I can just about hear you. You're still a bit mottled. Yeah, I think as well, it's a great thing if you're starting the journey and it's something that helps you along making those little changes. If you have to swap something out for a keto product, I think they're great for that. But in the long run, or I think when you're strict like I am now, I find that I can't even have. I had a keto bar the other day actually, and it just, my stomach was not happy at all. I just can't handle those sorts of things anymore. So yeah, but I think they're really, really great to start with whilst you're making the changes. And also I agree with the children as well. I think it's something that's really good for them. Again, as a whilst they're changing, whilst they're changing their diet.
Yeah, 100%.
Right, so we have another question here from Herbert, long-time strict carnivore, Keto Pro electrolytes with or without astaxanthin?
Brilliant question. And the reason that Herbert has put that in is that we have now created a range of electrolytes without astaxanthin. We've put the astaxanthin as a separate product. Astaxanthin, which is a topic that we covered last week, Abs and I went into this. It's the only compound that is a carotenoid. It's known as the king of the carotenoids that doesn't start its journey as a pro-oxidant, which I believe to be incredibly beneficial. It's the type of compound that comes from salmon, for example. We've taken it out because some people don't like the taste. So we created a product that contained the astaxanthin, which is a natural version, incredibly beneficial. It does incredible things to the body, 550 times more potent than vitamin E, 800 times stronger than coenzyme Q10, like 80 times more potent than vitamin C as antioxidant. It's an incredible compound, but it does have a fishy taste. So we had a series of negative reviews on Amazon, which basically dropped our listing a little. So what we decided to do was to take the asta out, and we've introduced 66 trace minerals instead, including things like selenium and molybdenum and so on and so forth. Many other favorable compounds in there. So the astaxanthin is available as a separate product. But this one now, or the main one, you can still buy the compound or the electrolytes that contain the asta on the web. But once that stock is gone, the electrolytes are now completely asta-free. It's whatever your preference is, Herbert. I mean, you probably don't require the additional benefit of the asta, so I would just go for the asta-free. The new one that we've brought out, which is pink lemonade, is the nicest one to date. Like it's absolutely incredible. I add it to sparkling water, and it tastes like lemonade. Like it's incredible. It doesn't taste salty, it doesn't taste sweet. It's incredible. But I would, for you, Herbert, being long-time carnivore, I'd go for the asta-free.
Lovely, thank you. We have another question from Karen Brace-Girdle. Running London Marathon fasted. Can I use gels during the run or keto bars? Any advice not to collapse? I'll be about 5 hours on my feet.
Brilliant. Have you got any thoughts, Abs, before I jump in?
I mean, if it was me, I wouldn't be using the gels. If anything, I would be, having something fat-based. And leading up to the marathon, I would make sure that I do plenty of interval training. I would make sure that I really loaded up on the protein and fat going into it, and really avoid the sugar actually, because that's just gonna affect the brain, to be honest. And a lot of people give up, or they stop because of the brain issue, not necessarily because of the muscle. As we know now from research that was published finally probably last week, or no, earlier this week, in fact, by Professor Tim Noakes' team. So stay away from the glucose is my advice. And if you can use things like, the Keto Pro C8 powder and things along those lines, I think you're going to be much, much better.
Yeah, I agree. I always compete fasted. And what you need to remember, kind of, especially if you're 5 hours on your feet, you're going to be in zone 2. So you're going to be in the fat burning zone. So your requirement for any glucose is going to be negligible. And remember, your body makes glucose via gluconeogenesis, which is something that we've discussed in depth in the school group. So and I proved this when I ran a race at Chester, which I won, by the way. I ran a race at Chester and I won. I had a glucose monitor on, and there was like 2,000 runners in this race as well, by the way. And I'm just saying that because it's something I'm really proud of. I'm not a runner anyway, but I'm carnivore. So I ran the race with a glucose monitor on, and it showed how my blood glucose increased from like 5 up to just under 18 during the race, because my body was so dependent on having glucose. And that's what it does. It makes glucose, but I hadn't consumed any exogenous glucose. What the body does is it will send lactate from the muscle to the liver, recycle it, and send it back to the muscle as glycogen at a much higher rate that you can obtain through your diet. So I wouldn't recommend gels. The only time that I would recommend a gel is if you were training if you were an elite athlete and you were training to compete in like an Ironman, and you were aiming to do a half Ironman in sub 5 hours, or a full in like 9 or 10 hours less. That's the only time that you're going to need is high intensity work. So for you, Karen, fasted, as Ab said, protein and fat like before the race. So the night before, a nice fatty meal, a nice fatty steak, for example. Fill up on your fats. Make sure you go in hydrated and full of electrolytes. Use electrolytes along the course if you can. And Ab said, the C8 MCT oil or the exogenous ketones can be beneficial. If you do want something, the bars are fantastic. They're very, very low, around 1 gram per 50 grams of carb, but they contain MCT. So they might give you a little feeling of satiety while supplying your body with that additional MCT to fuel you through your race. So, and I know Karen is a member of our school group, so we can get into this in more detail.
Lovely. We have a question we still don't know how to say this person's name, Mika or Micah. We'll find out one day eventually. I take C8 3 times daily. Each drink is 10 grams. How many hours apart should I take them?
Yeah, brilliant question. So look, the C8, which is caprylic acid, so it's basically 8 carbons long. There are other MCT, so this is a form of an MCT, which is a medium chain triglyceride. This is a fat, which is found in things like coconut oil and everything else for that matter. C8 you can find in goat's milk, but it's easier to obtain from coconut. So it's a medium chain triglyceride. Now, what happens with the long chain triglycerides or the long chain fatty acids? It goes through a long, laborious process in the body where these fatty acids are broken down. They're absorbed in the small intestine. They're transported through the whole body via chylomicrons, where they eventually end up in the liver, and then they either enter beta oxidation or eventually ketone production, or they store. So that's the fate of fatty acids. C8 skips this long, laborious process and goes straight to the liver via the hepatic portal vein, where it's instantly converted into ketones, whether you were ketogenic or not. So whether you were living a low-carb ketogenic lifestyle, if you consume C8 MCT, which is natural, by the way, comes from coconut oil, it will produce ketones in the body. When you produce the ketones, 1 tablespoon, which is a little bit more than 10 grams, will last about 3 hours if you are active. If you were sedentary, it would last longer. So if you're walking or jogging, or even if you're running a marathon at a very slow pace, the ketones will last in your body for around 3 hours. So basically, 3 to 4, 5 hours maybe apart, Mika. I tend to use it as and when I feel the need. So I'll use them in the morning. I'll use them maybe before the gym. I'll use them before we do a live, because the ketones, once they're broken down from the C8, create BHB, beta hydroxybutyrate. The BHB will breach the blood-brain barrier and supply this pure, clean energy that you can't obtain, without living the lifestyle. It will help block inflammation, increase nitric oxide, all of these incredible things that you can achieve through living the lifestyle. It just enhances it that little bit further. But that's what I would do. Generally 4 to 5 hours apart if you're not active. If you're active, you can put it a little bit closer together. Our good friend Alan Reeves, he takes like 30 grams at a time, which is like, I wouldn't recommend somebody new do this because you will end up on the toilet. You need to build up to that. I would recommend starting with maybe a teaspoon and building up to a tablespoon over a period of a week or two. But you use MCT, Abs. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I don't look into it in that much detail, to be honest, because if I'm going to have it in a particular day, I generally only have it once. And I use it when I know I'm going to be possibly a long part of the day without being able to eat. So, for example, in a couple of days' time, I'm actually working in Paris, and I'm going to be there for probably the rest of the week. And all day, I'm going to be on my feet, speaking to doctors and distributors and things like that. And I'm not going to have a chance to eat practically the whole day. So at that point, I will take the C8. It will give me plenty of fuel for the day because it's fat. And it will put me into ketosis when it gets converted into ketones. And I'll just use those days to just heavily go into ketosis, probably a lot more than I normally would do. And then when I come back home, go back to normal. That's it. Perfect.
Fantastic.
We have a question from our good friend George. Hi, George. Myself and some of the Kilt's health coaches are going live for January. I have stopped eggs. I just noticed I'm not itching at night. Any comment? This is really interesting, actually. We were just, me and Rich were at breakfast on the weekend, and we were discussing this. I had only just realized that eggs give me a mucus production, that they produce mucus in me, and after breakfast on Saturday morning I really noticed. I just finished and I only had 3 eggs, and I was clearing my throat, and I was just really mucusy. I'll hand this one over to you, Rich, because you know the technical terms, but we had a look. We looked up something. What is it called? Overmucoid or something?
That's it. Yeah, overmucoids. So there are other proteins, but overmucoid is the biggest offending compound. It's and what we tend to find is when people come into a keto carnivore lifestyle, eggs are a staple, and eggs are fantastic if you can consume them, especially in the early stages. They're incredible, high in choline. They're a fantastic source of cholesterol. 100% bioavailable, generally easily tolerated with most people. But what we find is when you've been on the journey for as long as the 3 of us on this call, your body preferences the higher quality, like the beef and the lamb. And then when you start to put the eggs back in, it notices that there's compounds in there, such as the overmucoids, which can be problematic. So this is why you've seen that, George. But typically, you'll find that somebody who is new to this, who implements eggs as part of their lifestyle, they won't suffer these problems because the body is utilizing all of those nutrients, because it's far better than the lifestyle that they were living prior to this. So it's an interesting thing. It's a transition that we see as you travel deeper into the journey. Have you noticed this with eggs, Abs?
Yeah, I mean, I think eggs actually, they do contain a lot of nutrients, but they're not really what our ancestors would have eaten, I reckon.
I agree.
And that's probably why we don't have the biological capacity to be trouble-free with them. And I agree about the overmucoid. There's also ovalbumin. Both of these can trigger mast cell release, can trigger mast cells in the gut, and that releases stored up histamine. So that matches what Lauren had, like, perfectly. But also histamine levels, they can follow circadian rhythm. Maybe that's why there's a nocturnal element to it. And it can peak at night. So if your histamine bucket, to stick with my NAD analogy, if your histamine bucket was already near, overflowing because of egg consumption during the day, then the natural nocturnal spike would overfill that bucket and then spill outwards. So you get the itch scratch cycle just as you're trying to sleep. So that makes perfect sense. So there's a lot of reasons. You've also got the lysozyme factors, gut permeabilities, proteolytic signaling. The lysozymes combine to and open up the tight junctions of the intestinal wall, which is the intestinal hyperpermeability. Arachidonic acid is there's pro-inflammatory prostaglandins that they're linked to as well. So there's lots of reasons. And for me, I don't mind an odd egg now and again. That's it. But I wouldn't call it a staple. It used to be something I loved and have a lot of because I love the taste of the yolk. But now, after learning a lot from Jofia Clemens, I really, really rarely have eggs, and as well as dairy. I avoid that as well. I'm not a massive fan of having both. And I've got to say, I do feel better. It's not like I was feeling bad before, but I do feel better without eggs and without dairy personally.
100%. And it's eggs, I generally consume them once a week. This week I've probably consumed them twice, maybe 3 times. but they're not a staple generally every day. But I love eggs, and I think that I wouldn't want to live a lifestyle that I couldn't consume eggs at all. But you're right, 100%. So eggs and dairy are incredibly problematic for most people. And I think we've probably got 3 minutes. Have we got enough time for a quick question? Any other questions there, Lauren?
Yes, we have one from Jennifer. Hello, if you contract a cold or flu, what do you find are the best remedies? Would adding ginger tea or garlic benefit temporarily until symptoms improve? Thank you.
Rich, I think that's your kind of question, isn't it? I think you very well know about those molecules.
And I will just say something. I haven't tried this, but I was at a workshop not very long ago. Dr. Sarah Myhill, and she swore by I'd never even heard of it before, but she had them there that you could purchase something called a salt pipe, and you just breathe, you just basically inhale it. But she swore by adding a drop of iodine into this salt pipe, and any first sign of a cold, she said to just hold that near your nose and inhale it. And she said that, I think she said 30 years, she's never had a cold. It's always, every time she's felt like she's had a cold, she would sniff this iodine in the salt pipe, and she said it never ever come to anything. So I just found that really interesting, and I'm actually going to purchase one because I'll try it on my children.
Do you know what? I think it might have been in Austria or Germany or somewhere. I can't remember. I'm probably wrong. But somewhere like that in Europe, I think they used to treat children with asthma by the beds that they were on. They would send them all underground to salt mines, and the ward would be underground in the salt mine, and it used to massively help them and clear things up. And that matches what you're saying. I think there's something about that.
Interesting. Yeah. No, she absolutely swore by it, and she said that she hasn't had a cold in 30 years, and she said anytime she feels a slight sniffle, she will drop a drop of iodine in the salt pipe, inhale it, and it never turns into anything. And I heard that and thought I've got to give that a go. So I will. That's on my purchase list, probably in one of my baskets somewhere.
You can be the guinea pig. That sounds interesting.
Yeah.
We've got 1 minute to wrap up, but in short, look, these things are plant compounds and medications. And again, coming back to one of the first questions that we mentioned, they activate a pathway called NRF2. They can be beneficial in the short term. So it's things like ginger or tea may be beneficial in fast tracking the recovery, but you need to increase the fats in particular, fats and proteins, particularly your saturated fats. But they may be beneficial, but only in the short term. You don't want to consume these things daily, and certainly not for prevention, because they will overexpress that pathway that Abs mentioned earlier, which is the NRF2 pathway, and it will lead to more oxidative damage further down the line. So potentially beneficial in the short term. Increase the fats, increase your protein, make sure you get lots of the fatty acids, particularly saturated fats. And I think that you'll probably see a benefit from that. The other thing that you can try is fermented cod liver oil. Fermented cod liver oil, which I used to purchase from the Real Food Company, which that contains a little bit of ginger. That I found to be very beneficial off a teaspoon when I was coming down with a cold or flu symptoms. But yeah, some food for thought. And I think we need to wrap that up, guys. So let's wrap that up. And we are now moving over to Skool for another private Q&A in there with the Skool members. So if you were not already signed up, feel free to sign up. The link is in the show notes below. Abs, Lauren, been a pleasure as always. Thank you both. Take care, and I will see you shortly.
See you in a bit.
And thanks for the questions. Some incredible questions, as always.
He's left, and he's left it on live.
Hang on.
Right, take care, folks. We will try and message him to actually end the live stream.
I wonder if I can do it from my end, Abs.
Can you do it?
He's back.
Oh no, he's back. He's back. He's realised.
Now ending the stream.